The European Union is collapsing, and Germany is the one destroying it. But that's exactly the plan. You may not want to hear this analysis, but European integration was always a German project designed to serve German interests. When those interests change, the project ends. I've spent decades watching Brussels pretend that European unity was about shared values and democratic ideals. That was always propaganda. The EU was a mechanism for German economic dominance disguised as continental cooperation. Now that mechanism no longer serves German strategic needs. Germany is systematically dismantling the European Union from within while positioning itself for the post-Brussels era. The question isn't whether this will happen. The question is how quickly Berlin can execute the strategy without triggering continental chaos. Liberal observers blame populism, nationalism, or Russian interference for Europe's problems. They're missing the fundamental reality. Germany created the EU to solve Germany's strategic challenges. Those challenges have changed. The solution must change too. The timing isn't coincidental. The Ukraine war, the energy crisis, the migration surge, these aren't random events undermining European solidarity. They're opportunities for Germany to reshape continental architecture according to new strategic requirements. Berlin isn't trying to save the EU. Berlin is preparing to replace it. Germany's relationship with the European Union was always transactional, not emotional. The EU served three critical German interests: containing France, integrating Eastern Europe, and providing markets for German exports. Now the EU is hindering these goals, making Germany the most destructive force in Brussels. Consider the economic mathematics. Germany pays roughly 60 billion euros annually into the EU budget while receiving about 12 billion back. That's a net contribution of 48 billion euros every year to subsidize countries that increasingly oppose German policy preferences. For decades, this was acceptable because the EU provided Germany with captive markets and cheap labor. Now the costs exceed the benefits. Eastern European members take German money while rejecting German migration quotas. Southern European members demand German bailouts while blocking German energy policies. Western European members compete with German industry while criticizing German fiscal discipline. From Berlin's perspective, the EU has become an expensive constraint rather than a useful tool. The energy crisis revealed the fundamental contradiction. Germany's industrial competitiveness depended on cheap Russian gas. The EU's moral legitimacy supposedly depended on opposing Russian aggression. When forced to choose between European solidarity and German prosperity, Berlin chose German prosperity. The decision to gradually restore energy relationships with Russia, despite official EU sanctions, tells you everything about Germany's real priorities. Germany's demographic reality compounds the problem. Germany's population is aging rapidly while its birth rate remains below replacement level. German economic growth increasingly depends on immigration, but EU migration policies constrain Germany's ability to select the most productive immigrants. Why accept refugees dictated by EU quotas when Germany could choose skilled workers based on its own criteria? The migration crisis of 2015 was a turning point, though few recognized it at the time. Angela Merkel's decision to accept over 1 million migrants wasn't European generosity, it was German calculation. Germany needed workers for its aging industrial base. The EU framework provided political cover for a purely national policy. But when other EU members refused to share the costs while demanding the benefits, Germany learned that European solidarity is a one-way street. France's response has been predictably counterproductive. Emmanuel Macron continues to speak of European sovereignty and strategic autonomy as if France possessed the economic capacity to lead continental integration. But France's economy is barely half the size of Germany's. French defense spending is declining while German military modernization accelerates. French influence in Eastern Europe is minimal, while German economic relationships dominate. Macron's vision of European strategic autonomy requires European defense spending of at least 500 billion euros annually. Current spending is roughly 200 billion. The gap cannot be closed without German participation, but German strategic priorities are shifting toward bilateral relationships. The Eastern European dynamic is particularly revealing. Poland, Hungary, Czech Republic, and the Baltic states joined the EU primarily for economic development and security guarantees. They've achieved the economic development through German investment in EU structural funds. They've achieved security guarantees through NATO membership and American military presence. The EU, from their perspective, was always a stepping stone to more meaningful relationships. These countries now position themselves as intermediaries between Germany and America, rather than as junior partners in a French-led European project. Poland's military modernization, funded partially by German technology transfers, creates a buffer zone that serves German security interests without requiring EU frameworks. Hungary's energy cooperation with both Russia and Germany demonstrates how bilateral relationships achieve results that multilateral EU negotiations cannot. The institutional architecture of the EU was designed for a different strategic environment. When the Soviet Union existed, Western European integration made sense as defensive alliance against communist expansion. When the United States provided unconditional security guarantees, European nations could afford to prioritize economic cooperation over military capabilities. Those conditions no longer exist. Russia's invasion of Ukraine didn't strengthen European unity. It exposed European weakness. Germany's initial reluctance to provide military aid revealed that German strategic culture prioritizes economic relationships over military confrontation. China's rise presents challenges that European institutions cannot address effectively. Chinese economic influence creates divisions that German leadership cannot resolve through Brussels mechanisms. Chinese technology competition requires German cooperation with American companies in ways that EU regulations actively impede. The Euro currency union exemplifies the fundamental problem with European integration. Monetary union without fiscal union creates structural imbalances that benefit Germany while penalizing peripheral economies. Southern European countries cannot devalue their currencies to restore competitiveness. Eastern European countries cannot adjust interest rates to manage economic cycles. The result is permanent German advantage and permanent peripheral resentment. Germany could solve these problems by accepting fiscal transfers that redistribute German wealth to deficit countries. But such transfers would undermine the economic efficiency that makes Germany competitive in global markets. Alternatively, Germany could allow the Eurozone to fragment, permitting each country to pursue monetary policies suited to their economic conditions. This second option is increasingly attractive to German policymakers. Brexit provided the template for managed disintegration. Britain demonstrated that leaving the EU doesn't require economic collapse or political isolation. British GDP has remained stable, British trade relationships have diversified, and British foreign policy has gained flexibility. The short-term disruptions were manageable, and the long-term benefits are becoming apparent. Germany is taking notes. The Green Deal represents everything wrong with EU governance from a German perspective. Environmental regulations that handicap German industry, while Chinese competitors face no such constraints. Energy transition timelines that ignore technological realities. German engineering excellence cannot overcome regulatory stupidity imposed by Brussels bureaucrats. Germany's industrial strategy increasingly focuses on bilateral partnerships that bypass EU frameworks. German-American cooperation on semiconductors. German-Japanese collaboration on hydrogen energy. These relationships deliver concrete results without requiring consensus from 27 different governments. The demographics of European politics are shifting against Brussels. Younger Germans are less committed to European integration than their parents. They're more concerned about German competitiveness than European solidarity with declining economies. Skilled immigrants to Germany often come from Asia, not other EU countries. Their loyalties are to German opportunities, not European values. Russia's strategy exploits these divisions by offering bilateral relationships that undermine EU cohesion. But Russia didn't create these divisions. Russia is exploiting contradictions inherent in the European project. American strategy strengthens NATO relationships while allowing EU institutions to atrophy. America offers alternatives to European integration, and European nations are accepting them. The COVID pandemic provided a preview of post-EU governance. When crisis struck, European solidarity disappeared immediately. Countries closed borders, hoarded medical supplies, pursued national solutions. Germany's recovery was faster because German policies prioritized German needs. Financial markets are already pricing in European fragmentation. German bond yields remain low, while peripheral yields fluctuate based on political uncertainty. Currency traders understand that Germany's commitment to European unity is conditional, not permanent. China's Belt and Road Initiative exploited European weakness by negotiating bilateral infrastructure agreements with individual EU members. The lesson was clear. Bilateral relationships achieve results, while multilateral negotiations produce gridlock. The technological competition with China requires decision-making speed that EU institutions cannot provide. Germany's new government represents a generational shift. Younger German politicians view European constraints as impediments to German competitiveness. The timeline for German withdrawal from EU frameworks will be gradual, not dramatic. Germany won't announce an exit strategy because such announcements would trigger panic. Instead, Germany will systematically reduce participation in EU programs while increasing investment in alternative partnerships. First, Germany will demand fundamental EU budget reforms. When blocked, Germany will reduce contributions unilaterally. Second, German companies will receive exemptions from EU regulations that handicap global competitiveness. Third, Germany will pursue security relationships that bypass EU foreign policy frameworks. The geopolitical consequences will reshape European order fundamentally. France will face choosing between junior partner status to Germany or pursuing independent relationships with non-European powers. Eastern Europe will align more closely with the United States. Britain's post-Brexit trajectory provides the model for successful European disengagement. Germany's strategic calculation is coldly rational. The EU served German interests when Germany needed peaceful integration and market access. Now Germany needs competitive flexibility and strategic autonomy. The institutional frameworks that once facilitated German goals now constrain them. This isn't about German nationalism or European values. This is about strategic effectiveness in a changing international system. Germany will maintain cooperative relationships with European neighbors, but on bilateral terms that serve German interests. The age of German self-sacrifice for European integration is ending. The European Union's final days have already begun. The question is whether European leaders will manage the transition intelligently or resist the inevitable until crisis forces chaotic dissolution. Germany has made its choice. The rest of Europe must now make theirs.